Hi everybody, this is Ed Majeski from Friday Night Vinyl, and as always, Friday Night Vinyl is brought to you by Red Solo Cup. And Red Solo Cup is the officially endorsed concert cup of the stadium parking lot security people, because if you're drinking in a bottle, they're going to tell you no, no, no. But if you're drinking, well, this is a Steve Perry Red Solo Cup, they're probably going to tell you no, no, no. But if you're drinking in a regular Red Solo Cup, they're probably going to tell you, yeah, that's cool. So anyway, I'm doing a little special here called for the group The Spectrum, a tribute to all classic rock concerts, which I've been to many, and I'm going to discuss a few. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Bob Hill and Tom Cleveland for allowing us at Friday Night Vinyl to post our live video alerts and everything in there, and also a thank you to you guys for some of you joining us for the broadcast and everything. It's all about music, and we're really grateful about it. And in the fall, so when you see this on the YouTube link, go there and subscribe. In the fall, we do our live broadcast. We're going to do it on YouTube because there's not going to be as much censoring and stuff going on. We're going to do it probably starting in October. We're going to have an end of the summer show in a few weeks. But anyway, so what I want to discuss now is Spectrum concerts. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And we maybe have a great show that we can do on it where we get all you guys in there and we just totally discuss some concerts. And that'll be cool, because the whole idea of Friday Night Vinyl is we're trying to be the what we leave behind as fans of the music, that what we enjoyed about the shows. I mean, we're hearing the critics, right, and the fact that the band sold 3 million records, but really, would you rather see a review of Beethoven from the 1800s, or read what fans of Beethoven wrote and said, hey, oh, it was like this or like that? And anyway, I know I went Beethoven, I went way back there, but anyway, so I'm going to discuss with you right now my top 5 and an honorable mention favorite concerts at the Spectrum. So mind you, I have to start where I started going. There's been so many concerts that have been posted where I'm like, oh my god, if I can go back in time and see that. And I would like to have my salary, and I forget the guy's name, and I apologize, the guy who posts all the Spectrum Electric Factory ads that were out there. And the other day he posted the first concert I ever went to, and it's number 1 on my list. It's Aerosmith Rock. It was Aerosmith, August 13th, 1976, and the opening act was Derringer, and it said $7 in advance, $8 day of show. And I'm thinking, wow, I definitely have to get my ticket ahead of time to save that $1. And we look at those prices, and we're looking at some of our salaries now and saying, oh, if we could only go back in time, we probably would have never got to where we were today, because we probably would have went to about 70 concerts a year. And it's a shame, because there were a lot of people who you weren't into, or you were, but you had to do your budget accordingly. So anyway, my first number 1 concert ever in Spectrum history was Aerosmith, August 13th, 1976. And the story behind that for me, I'm going to share with you, is I wanted to go see the Stones in 75, and my parents would let me. In 72, my parents wouldn't let me, and I was very young at the time. So my parents were still dead set against me going to concerts. So we had just won a chunk of the lottery in 76 in a TV show. We were one ping pong ball drop away from millionaires, and that's a little brutal for me, but you can ask me that on a side thing, and I'll tell you the whole story about that. But anyway, we had 10 games at the Vet, where we were row 1, right next to the picnic area on the third base side of Veterans Stadium, but we were row 1. And I've gone in there early and had met many baseball players and all that stuff. Well, the Phillies were battling it out with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and one of our games was rained out, and in late July there was a major doubleheader against the Pittsburgh Pirates that my dad wanted to take my grandfather. So I thought, okay, that's all good. Now, I had a person who was a friend of the family, and we all have a friend of the family who is not really our relative, but we call them our relative. So this person was called my Aunt Dawn, and she was the president of the Hilton down by the Spectrum. And I got to meet a lot of rock stars that way because people would get thrown out of the lobby, and all I had to say was, I'm so and so, and they let me be. So she told me she can get me to see a show and all this stuff, and so I had asked her I'd like to go see Aerosmith, and I made a deal with my dad saying I will let Grandpa go to the game. I wouldn't have done it anyway, but I had to barter if you let me go to see Aerosmith. And he's like, okay, sure. So anyway, fast forward, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to my first concert, but I don't hear nothing from my Aunt Dawn. Nothing. So it's Friday, August 13th. I live in Southwest Philadelphia at 72nd and Dix, if anybody knows that area. And there's a park out front. And me and my best friend, Dave Spurrier, are out there. We're playing soccer, kicking the ball around, and I'm really upset. I'm like, ah. And it's like 5 o'clock at night. And my mom yells at the door, Ed! And I'm like, what? She goes, Aunt Dawn's on the phone. I'm like, yes. So, my buddy's like telling me, I'm not going to go. I said, if you don't go, I can't go. You have to go. If you don't go, they're not going to let me go by myself. So we go in, boom, sure enough, she gives me instructions. So we get down there. I was actually on Aerosmith's guest list. So we go down underneath the Spectrum, like over, I'm pointing to the screen here, but let's see if we can, well, it's actually on the other side of the building where you go down underneath. So I go down there, and I say my name and all this stuff, and there's nothing. And so my best friend's just going, yeah, this is not happening. So they let me go past the doors to the phone, and I call backstage, and I am talking to Aerosmith's tour manager. I'm 14 years old. Yeah, I was 14. I was a month shy of 15. And I said, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, yeah. He goes, tell the guy this. I'm like, okay, thank you. So I hang up, and I walk out. And my best friend would really tell the story the best, because he's all doubting. I just went to the security guard and went, blah, 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 because I don't remember what the hell it was. And he's like, oh, psh, go ahead. And we were in. And we get up there, and, as a 14-year-old, it was freaking loud. We sat on the steps in section AZ at the very top, because it was a dance concert, it was general admission. And Rick Derringer, we heard Rick Derringer play Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, and he came back out and he's doing an encore. He's like, I could play all night. And while I appreciated Rick Derringer, and I appreciated him more later on down the road, I wanted to hear Aerosmith. And it was on the Rocks tour, so think about it. My first concert was Aerosmith on the Rocks tour, where they played everything from Rocks and before. So, and it was unbelievably loud. It was a crazy situation. And the funniest thing was when we both walked out of the concert to go back to the phones, so I can call my parents, because we lived in Southwest Philly. It was only a 3-minute drive away. As we're walking by, we're looking over at JFK Stadium. Now remember, this is August of '76. We look over at JFK Stadium, and we're just like, it's amazing that concert, that building sold out 100,000 to see Yes. And we were just like, how could that be? How could anybody, 100,000 people go to see Yes? We were just amazed. So, let's go to my number 2 all-time favorite concerts I went to at the Spectrum. My last day of high school, 1979, Yes. It was like June 21st, it was a Friday. The day before, we went to Franklin Field, where Yes were playing a soccer game, I think against the Fury, that Rick Wakeman was a co-owner with Peter Frampton and a couple other people. So I got to meet everybody at Yes. I got to Chris Squire. I was walking with Chris Squire. He put his arm around me, and we were talking and blah, blah, blah. I thought I was going to the men's room, and I walk into a locker room, and there's Rick Wakeman, and I basically described Rick Wakeman to my friends like, oh, he was silly, and apparently, yeah, that's Rick Wakeman. I met John Anderson, John Anderson and Alan White, which were a little bit shorter than I had expected, and I met Steve Howe, which is one of the few people in my life that I met who were one of my idols, where I was actually nervous meeting. And I just remember shaking Steve Howe's hand, and it was like shaking a dead fish. And I guess I understand to a point, because his fingers are his livelihood, so he's not going to try to like challenge you with a firm grip. But it was just like, ooh. But anyway, I just thought it was funny that how we had this, and it was with my best friend Dave, who we went to the Aerosmith show for. Next up was Queen. I mean, I got to see Freddie Mercury. There was a couple of reasons I missed earlier on, and I regretted it, but I at least got to see them on the Game tour. And while I was upset I saw Freddie Mercury with short hair, because I mean that's silly. Which kind of I got to change this around a little bit. After saying that was a trigger for my next. Yeah, it was just still great. It was great to see Freddie Mercury live. So I have a different one at 4. So I'm going to bump it down, because when I said hair, it triggered me to think my next concert on this list is The Who. I saw The Who on the Who's Who Are You tour on December 10th, 1 week after the Cincinnati trampling incident. And one of the things about seeing them on this tour that I was excited about originally when they went on tour was to see Keith Moon. And Keith Moon passed away, I think, in between the first leg and the second leg of the tour. Now, mind you, the second leg of the tour did not go on sale. Like, when I bought my ticket, I already knew Keith Moon had passed, and Kenny Jones was the new drummer. But when that album came out and they announced they were going to tour, I couldn't wait to see them, because Keith Moon was just amazing. But I also remember that's when Daltrey like cut his hair. It's like, I know it seems silly, but I'm sure many of you can understand, what I'm talking about here. So it was still a great show. They let us up 100 at a time up these steps here at the Spectrum. They had it barricaded off, and I think in the Spectrum group, many of you had posted. There was a person who had the Who Cincinnati with footprints all over it. And you know what? For whatever you say about Philadelphia, I'm sorry, they beat the shit out of the people selling those shirts. And it's like there's fun, there's humor. That went too far. And the fact that I saw these people getting their ass kicked, you know what? They deserved it. They were trying to make money, and it wasn't funny. You're making fun of like people who like us, even in Philly, were going to a concert and they died, and it just wasn't cool. So next up on my list was Cheap Trick. I saw them on the Budokan tour. And the opening act was Graham Parker and the Rumor, and Graham Parker and the Rumor had Squeezing Out Sparks, and it was just a great show from Graham Parker's set, which was really good, right on through to Cheap Trick. I don't have much to say about this, because I actually threw the Who in there, and I realized, wow, how did I miss that one? And I'll probably keep going and missing things. But next up was ELO. It was called the Big Event. It was the Out of the Blue tour. It's where they had the spaceship. Now, I just recently saw ELO a couple years ago at the Wells Fargo Center, and it kind of created a new word here for Friday Night Live called mer, where mer. Now, mind you, even back then, Jeff Lynne was kind of like frozen in the spot, but the cello players and the violin players and stuff was going on, and it was exciting. But the thing is, after Out of the Blue album, like, Jeff Lynne got rid of the cellos and violins and just synthesizers, and to me, it sucked. So for me, when I saw them on this tour, to me, if I could take my friends that I took to the ELO show 2 years ago at the Wells Fargo Center back to this show, it was miles above anything. But if you missed ELO, if you never saw them in their heyday, I understand that the last time or last 2 years, it was worthy to see. Um, Next up on here, and I give this honorable mention, but for me it's not honorable mention, but it was also one of the first concert I ever went to by myself because I couldn't get anybody else to go. And I was a guitar player and had guitar player friends, and they're like, "Rah." And then I've seen this person 4 times, and every time I've seen him by myself, and every time people who I asked to go regretted it afterwards, and I'm like, what the hell? It's like Jeff Beck. I saw Jeff Beck at the Spectrum headliner on the There and Back tour. The opening act was Michael Stanley Band, who's a really good band out of, I believe it's the Ohio area, Steubenville area. They had a hit, but they're more of like a jazzy kind of rock band who has really good musicianships and really good songs. But She Don't Love You Like I Love You. If she would, she wouldn't break your heart. But that was his thing. But seeing Jeff Beck, just amazing. Now my worst show ever was Bob Dylan, and I got tricked into going, and I ended up not having a ticket. That was part of the tricking. I thought somebody was just bringing me, and it's like, oh no, I'm bringing the date. I just want you to see him, and I'm like, and it was on his Born Again Christian tour in the like 1980 or something like that, and the deal was my car was in the shop. If you take me to this, the next night at the Spectrum was Foreigner on the Foreigner 4 tour. That'll give you the year, and the opening act was Billy Squier. And I'm like, I wanted to see that show. And my buddy said, oh yeah, sure, we'll do this. And I never got to see the second show. And so for me, I got there, somebody slipped, it was raining, it was pouring out, they slipped on the sidewalk and hit their head, and everybody that was with them, they had to go to the hospital with him. And they sold me one of their tickets at face value. So I had $7 ticket, and I was in row 10. And the person sitting next to me wore an army jacket and saw the Grateful Dead 30 times. If you're a Grateful Dead fan, I love you. I appreciate them more. I always wanted to see them, but I was not into them at that point in time. And this person saw them 30 times and wanted to tell me about every time they saw the Grateful Dead. And not only that, but Dylan was not playing anything that was popular. I think he maybe played 3 songs that anybody in that building ever heard of before. It was all this Christian stuff or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, it was my worst concert ever until Christy Hynde at the Tower about 6 years ago. But this is all Spectrum related. Message me and I'll tell you the Christy Hynde story. But other shows that were great that I saw, Boston, I was right up against the barricade and Sammy Hagar was the opening act. I saw Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio. It was the Heaven and Hell tour with Sammy Hagar as the opening act. Another great show I saw at the Spectrum was Rick James with Tina Marie, and Rick James was the headliner, Tina Marie was the middle act, and the opening act was this unknown guy called Luther Vandross. Other shows, The Cars with the Romantics, The Cars with Greg Ken, The Cars with Wang Chung. I saw Asia, Ted Nugent. Now, as far as shows that I missed, and we all kind of have it locked up here like that concert or two that we missed. And there's been several of you on the Spectrum page who posted this that were there, and I don't even think it might have been. It was just, to me, the lineup for me. It was Foghat was the headliner, Sweet was the middle act, and the opening act was Cheap Trick. I mean, that to me was just wow. If I can go back in time, that's the number one show. That's not Hendrix and all those people. That's the show. Another show I missed. Both bands were on their debut album. It was Foreigner and The Cars. And as a promo on this tour, they were giving away a foreign car. But it was Foreigner's first album and The Cars' first album, and they were dual headliners where they both basically did full sets. Didn't matter who went first or whatever. Another band that I miss that I would have loved to see back in the 70s, at the Spectrum was Earth, Wind and Fire, and I know they still tour and all that stuff. It's I would like to see them back in the heyday. And one more, well, Gino Vannelli is another one I would like to see back in the late '70s. I'm not a big Bruce Springsteen fan, but if I saw Bruce Springsteen on the Darkness of the Edge of Town tour or prior, and he played 3 hours and played all the songs from those albums, I get it. I would probably be just as big a Springsteen fan as many out there. I saw Bruce Springsteen later at another venue, not to be mentioned because we're talking about the Spectrum, for 3 hours, but he had all these songs where I just want to like slip my wrist. But when he had all that rock and stuff and all that back in the day, and he played for 3 hours, I get why people loved Springsteen and still love Springsteen. And again, going back to the early mid '70s, seeing Kiss, they were a band that did all this kind of stuff, and it was unknown back then. All these explosions and lights and fireworks, all that stuff. What happened later on down the road was there were bands, in my opinion, that had better music and had equally good excitement, stage theatrics, and all that stuff. But seeing Kiss recently and all that, it's like, yeah, I get it. They were always a good, entertaining band. Let's see what else. Campout Stories. And again, this is the front side. We all camped out on the back side, where you got your number. You had you get this little ticket that would say, my number for the Who was 1,874. Yeah, I got a chance at tickets. And I remember when I camped out for the Who, I had my guitar, I sat on the steps, again on the other side of this picture, and I played some Who songs, and I had people around me, and it was cool. It's like 3 in the morning, whatever. And around 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning, these trucks rolled in, and I started helping unload these Marshall stacks and all that, because my hair was long, and I kind of looked like I should have been there. And I was actually helping unload Styx equipment, and probably James Young's Marshall stacks on the stage, and Tommy Shaw. And I just kept helping. Now, the sad thing is, I wish I had the iPhone back then, so I could have, when I was standing out there on the center of the stage looking out, just to take a picture, maybe with a selfie of me at the Spectrum. But so we got done that, and there was this guy in high school that I knew. I'm like, there's so and so. He's like, hey man, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, all good. He goes, hey, can you do me a favor, man, and give me a ride home after this? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I said, so what's your number? He goes, oh man, my number's 18. And I'm like, really? He goes, how many? I said, how many tickets do you get? And he goes, 2. I'm like, well, I need 2 because you can get a max of 4. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. So I was so effing happy. I got my tickets, drove them home, all good. Called my best friend up because, oh yeah, my sisters went down to Wanamaker's and they got 6 tickets. The good news is we sold those tickets for $150 a piece, not by strong-arming anybody, but there was a guy, when I walked around the Spectrum, there was a guy who said, I'll give you $300 to a scalper, and the guy's like, no, $400. I'm like, what? So the guy's walking away. I said, dude, $150 a ticket. I got 2 for you. He's like, all right. So when I went around to my best friend, I said, yeah, I got $150 for the tickets. So he was expecting a 75, and I'm like, no, $150 each. So it was a good thing. Out of any opening act that I went to officially see, I went to see the Romantics as the opening act. They were the opening act for this band called the Jay Giles Band, who was on their Love Stinks tour, which I also had that album, but we were going there to see the Romantics, stuck around for Jay Giles, and it's just like, wow, another great band. But you could do that back then because the ticket prices were so cheap compared to your salary. You were only giving up 2 hours. If all your friends were going to a concert of a band you didn't like, you would go just to be with them because it didn't matter. It wasn't costing you, today, like 10-hour salary and all that stuff. So yeah, there's so many more things about the spectrum, so many more stories I'd love to share, and I know there's a lot of stories that you would love to share. So hopefully, and I should have probably said this throughout the show, subscribe to Friday Night Vinyl. We start in October. We're going to be on YouTube, so when you see where this channel is, subscribe, hit the alert thing. There's a little bell or whatever, so when we do go live, you'll get an alert. We have a great time talking about classic rock and new stuff that we've discovered, and it's all good. And again, Bob Hill, Tom Cleveland, thank you for allowing us to post in here, and to everybody else who's commented, joined our show, we appreciate it. And that's all I got for now. But see you in a few weeks for our end of summer show in August, and then season 4 starts on YouTube in October. Take care, guys.